All right, this is the fourth of 5 videos. Maybe it's the fourth of 4. We'll have to see if we cover everything. This is part 2 of punctuation. I'm beginning on page 10, number 4, letter D, with semicolons. I love the semicolon. It is misused, but it's really simple to use. And the most important way, the most common way we use the semicolon is to fix a run-on sentence. Remember, run-on sentence is 2 complete sentences that could stand on, each could stand on its own as a sentence. Professor Paparozzi loves good grammar. Her students write well. Okay? I can connect that very simply by, instead of using a comma and or making 2 complete sentences, I can just put a semicolon together and it's perfect. Okay? As long as you have 2 complete sentences on both sides. Now, what did I tell you a complete sentence was? It has a subject, the doer of the action. It has a verb, the action itself, what the action is in a sentence, and it expresses a complete thought. When you read it, you know exactly what the person was talking about. Okay, so under semicolons, to connect 2 independent but related clauses. Now they're calling them clauses, but to me it's easier to say 2 complete sentences. So this was his final summation, semicolon. It was strong and forceful. Now you could have put a period there, couldn't you? Easily. But they're very related ideas. You could have also used a comma and a conjunction. This was his final summation, comma, and it was strong and forceful. But with a comma, you also need a conjunction. With a semicolon, it stands by itself. That's why it's so easy. Okay. Here's another use of the semicolon to connect 2 independent clauses joined by a transitional word or conjunction such as therefore, however, or nevertheless. Now, a lot of people make a mistake and use only commas around however and therefore. But what you have to do is use a comma and a semicolon and a comma. And here's how we do it. Okay, now we're going to use this transitional word, therefore, because it's transitioning to the next thought. However, it's disagreeing with the previous thought. Or nevertheless, could be agreeing or could be disagreeing, we'll have to see. The defendant was not credible, semicolon. Therefore, comma, you must set it off with a comma. Therefore, comma, the jury voted to convict her. The most common usage is the next one. The attorney argued persuasively, semicolon. However, comma, the judge overruled her. Now, there are some sentences where however can just be set off as in a positive, additional information in the sentence. But in this particular case, we had 2 complete sentences on either side, and we used a transitional word to explain how the first related to the second, the transition to the second part of the sentence. So that's why we use the semicolon with one of those transitional words, therefore, nevertheless, however. However is the most common, and then the comma afterwards. Okay, now if we have a long list, we separate items in a list using commas. But I like when it's, what is correct is you can use commas, but when you have a long list and it's more than just 1 word or 2 words, as each item in the list is more than 1 or 2 words in and of itself, we want to use a semicolon. Have a little bit more of a pause. So let's look at the ones. Standing trial for embezzlement were the following defendants with Connie Rivers of Portland, Oregon, semicolon. Actually, this is done incorrectly. Standing trial for embezzlement were the following defendants. Take out the word including. After the word including, put a semicolon, Connie Rivers of Portland, Oregon, semicolon. Sam Salter of Seattle, Washington, semicolon. And Susan Stone of Butte, Montana, period. Now, notice that even before the word and, we're going to use some form of punctuation, in this case a semicolon. But I would take out the word including, and after the word defendants, we would put a colon. Standing trial for embezzlement were the following defendants. And notice that has a subject, a verb, and expresses a complete thought. So you can use the colon there. And in the list, use the semicolon. Okay? So take out the word including, and right after the word defendants, put a colon, and then use the semicolon to separate the items on the list. Now, this list is a little bit more complicated because you have the defendants and their hometowns. So it's a little bit more complicated. So that's why you would use, instead of a comma, you could use a semicolon. But a comma would be kind of okay there, but I would prefer that you use a semicolon. Now, the next one is the one I was speaking of. The elements to be proved in an action for breach of contract are as follows. Notice to make it a complete sentence, I had to have a verb, are, and then express the complete thought that the elements are as follows. The existence of a contract, semicolon. The unjustified breach of contract by one party, semicolon. And damage caused by the breach to the non-breaching party. These can also be separated by commas, but when you start with a colon and it's a complicated list, more than 2 or 3 words, definitely use the semicolon. Okay, letter F on page 10, quotation marks. So you know we do it to indicate the exact words of a speaker, or if we want to draw emphasis to a word that's kind of unusual or misused in a sentence, like we saw in week 1, were brides. These girls were not brides; they were victims. They were kidnapped victims. So we had the word brides in quotation marks. That was to show emphasis that it was being misused, because he was quoting somebody, but it was still nonetheless being misused. So we're drawing emphasis to a word. So, for example, to indicate the exact words of a speaker, Patrick Henry said, comma, give me liberty, give me death, period, end of quotation marks. Show me, comma, end of quotation marks, I said, period. That's easy. To explain or draw emphasis to a word, this is that bride's example I gave you. So here we want to set off the word defendant, giving it emphasis. The writer misspelled the word defendant in the brief. Well, that's like ridiculous. When you're writing something, you don't misspell the word defendant, for Pete's sakes, when you're writing in court. Okay. So now we use quotation marks to go up to 49 words only. After that, we block and indent them. So if you need help with that, that's easy. You just basically tab twice and have it single spaced in the middle. So if it's like 50 words or more, you want to do a block rather than quotation marks, okay? And always place commas, and periods inside of quotation marks. Place colons and semicolons outside of quotation marks, and the same with a question, okay? And sometimes you have quotes within a quote, and use a single quote and a double quote for quotes within a quote. Okay. Questions, please post a question on the discussion board, or frequently asked questions, or ask your professor. These are all tabs on the left. Okay, parentheses. Parentheses can be used to set off an interruption or an explanation. For example, his argument was res ipsa loquitur, a Latin phrase meaning the thing speaks for itself. Okay, so you put the parentheses on the outside of the quotation marks there, and the period on the outside of the parentheses. So, but you could also have put it in just a comma, okay? His argument was res ipsa loquitur, comma, a Latin phrase meaning the thing speaks for itself, period, and the quotation marks. To direct the leader to other information, the reader, the plaintiff has failed to allege justifiable reliance in the fraud case of action, and then you want to look on page 14 of something that's referenced in your list of references at the end. Now notice you put the period after the reference. So like Paparozzi, if I wanted to put the Paparozzi, the year 2016, and the parentheses, then the period, okay? That is part of the sentence, and so the period must come at the very end. And to introduce abbreviations, and you can either write just SIA, and I don't even think you need the quotes there on the last one. You can say here and after, SAI, or you can just say parentheses, SAI, and parentheses, comma, okay? Now, dashes are not that important. They're to create drama and draw a reader's attention to a page, or on page 11. In general, however, they are considered too informal for legal writing, so most of the time we use all the other punctuation marks. But a dash is made up of 2 hyphens, okay? So use a dash to indicate a break or interruption. There's, you're seeing it there. On the example, the defendant, not his brother, testified. I really don't like that. I would put commas there. To substitute for to in dates or numbers, he practiced law from 1980 to 1990. That's fine. That's absolutely acceptable. And you should read pages 80 to 94 of the case you heard me say to. So that's acceptable too, but I would not use it in the first example. Exclamation points are so rare in legal writing or correctional writing or law enforcement writing. But when it's used, it's to show emphasis or excitement or whatever. Hyphens are also important because there are many words that are hyphenated. Now, you would use it at the end if you're typing and a word is getting cut off, but WordPerfect and Word and all those word processing documents, we don't have hyphens anymore, so you're not used to it. But there are a lot of words that are compound words that you need a hyphen. So you know what? If you don't know, look it up. Type it in, look for a definition online. Okay, the slash or the virgule is not really that important, but it means or. It basically means or. And look in the example. The judge/jury agreed to acquit, which is fine. You could say this judge and the jury, or the jury agreed to acquit, but that either one is fine. Okay, now we're off of punctuation onto parallel structure and use of lists. Okay, so on the bottom of page 11, number 9. So another way to enhance readability is to use lists when discussing complex matters. Lists not only enable readers to comprehend information correctly, they create visual impact and interest because they are usually numbered and set apart from the rest of the text. When setting forth items such as the elements of a cause or a cause of action or the components of a definition, use list. Lists can be constructed in several ways, but to increase interest, you want to go to the first example. Set the list off from the rest of your narrative by spaces above and below your list. You can indent your list. You can identify items in your list with letters or bullets like they are bulleted here, and punctuate correctly by putting a semicolon after each one. For example, I could write down the number of courses that I've taught in the summer. Professor Paparozzi has taught the following courses this year, and it's such a long list that I can put criminal procedure, semicolon, criminal law, semicolon. But this is all below. This is in a list, like a dramatic list, one after the other, okay? All right, so I wouldn't worry too much about lists. If you have any questions with how to do a list, I can help you. And the last part of this video, which is the last video I'm going to do, are the common errors, and I should have pulled this out, but I wasn't sure I was going to get to them. Okay, so number on page 12 and 13, we're going to look at common, and page 14, if we have time. Okay. First of all, I know a lot of you write police reports and corrections reports and you don't indent, but in an essay you always indent each paragraph. So as the topics change and the subject of the paragraph change, start a new paragraph and indent it. Easiest way, hit your tab button, it'll go in 5 spaces, or just hit the space bar and it'll go in 5 spaces. Hit it 5 times. Number 1. We're on page 12, under number 10. Here are common errors that many students make. Okay, number 2, we've already gone over some of this. When you use a colon to list items like crimes committed, you must have a complete sentence before you use that first colon. We've already gone over that. Number 3, do not use a comma to separate 2 verbs. A lot of you are thinking because you see a but, a comma and a but, you think, wait a minute, you're using a comma and a but to connect 2 sentences, but the second sentence a lot of times has the same subject as the first. Try never to separate the subject of the sentence from the verbs of the sentence, and sometimes there are 2 verbs. For example, you can say something like, he was going to the store, comma, well, you're thinking a comma, and buying some clothes. A lot of you will put the comma, but you're separating those 2 verbs, and you don't really want to do that unless the comma is justified by another rule. So he's going to the store and buying Coca-Colas. Don't you put a comma before that and, like you would if you were saying he was going to the store, comma, and he was going to buy Coca-Cola. There I have 2 subjects, 2 verbs, 2 complete thoughts. Then you use the comma in conjunction. But unless it's expressing 2 complete thoughts and you have 2 subjects and 2 verbs, you don't use the comma because you don't want to separate those 2 verbs if they go back to the first sentence subject, the subject of the first sentence, he. Okay. Number 4, run-on sentences. We've already gone over it, so I don't need to repeat it here. Okay, but please avoid them, and you have 3 ways to do it. I gave you an exercise on how to do that. Some of you didn't even do it. Only 9, I think, or 10 out of the whole class did it. So you use either the semicolon to connect 2 complete sentences, use the comma and the conjunction to connect 2 complete sentences, or you just separate them with a period. But it was on the first week, and I don't think half the class did it. I was very disappointed to see that. Okay? All right, so on page 13, number 5, set off introductory clauses. We talked about that. You set off introductory clauses, that is, clauses that are non-essential to the sentence, that don't have the subject or the verb or express the complete thought. You set them off with a comma. And now remember, whatever's in an introductory phrase, being that she is tired, the next thing you have to say is something about her. It has to relate. Whatever's in the introductory clause after that comma, the subject of the sentence must relate back to whoever the subject of the sentence is. So, being that she was tired, comma, her clothes were ruffled. Well, no, that doesn't make any sense because being that she was tired, we have to talk about her. Being that she was tired, comma, she took off her ruffled clothes or whatever. Okay. Good versus well. This is another one of my pet peeves. Number 6 on page 13. I'm a good person, but you can't say I am well unless you are a water well and you give water from your mouth. You spouts out, okay? Because well is an adverb, and an adverb doesn't go with the verb to be. You can kind of say she is a well person, but she's a good person, meaning that she's a nice person. She's a well person, meaning that she's healthy. But you can't say, I am well. You can say, if someone says to you, how are you? The answer is, I am good. if someone says to you, how are you doing? You say, I am doing well, because the adverb well modifies the verb am doing. I am doing well. So it goes with the doing. I am doing well. I'm not I am well. Now, a lot of really smart people think it's correct to say I am well, but it's not correct. And you're getting here from the source on grammar, okay? Please do not say I am well. When people say it, it's nails on a chalkboard for me, just like I've talked about. Okay. So you say I am good. I'm doing well. It's because well is good is an adjective. Can go back to the person, but well is an adverb. It really is rarely used as an adjective. It goes back to this verb. Okay. So I am doing well. I am good. Now you can kind of say I'm doing good when I go to help the poor, because you are doing good, but that's not an adjective. That there is a noun, and you've got comes with the verb, goes with the verb. I am doing good, but you don't say I'm doing good if someone asks you about your health. Okay, you say I'm doing well or I am good. Okay, affect and effect. Affect is almost always a verb, and effect is almost always a noun. But there's sometimes, and also we have an exception to that. Your affect is your like if you wake up really tired, your affect during that day, affect, can be in that particular case a noun. Okay, and remember I talked to you about this number 8. Would have, should have, could have. It's not would have, could have, should have, but that's how we say it. But what's correctly is would have, should have, could have. Of is never part of a verb. Okay, and then my biggest pet peeve I've already gone over with you, the there, using there or they instead of it when referring to a singular noun. They implies more than one. A country is just one thing. A business is just one thing, okay? A school is one thing. So UNCP has its policies on whatever. It's not their policies. Even though UNCP makes up a lot of people, we're only referring to the one thing, the university. All right, number 10 on page 14. Don't use you when you write. Okay, when you write an email to somebody, you can say you did this, you did that, how you doing, whatever. How are you doing? But you can't use you in research because you're not talking to anybody. You're not talking to me. You're writing about a topic. So you should see how whatever. You can't do that. Or it's just used really colloquially, which means in speech. So we do use it all the time. But don't only use it in personal communications like emails, text, letters, etc. Number 11. Don't use an apostrophe to make any word plural. Remember we saw the 7s and 8s and 9s, etc., the I's, etc. You can use them. But basically, the only 2 times that you can use it to make it plural, the apostrophe to make it plural, is not the numbers, like single numbers 9s and 10s and A's. Okay, number 12, another pet peeve, which I've gone over repeatedly. Put the period and a comma inside of the quotation marks. Number 11, introducing a list with a colon. When a phrase that introduces a numbered or unnumbered or bullet list or whatever, use the colon as the bumper with the words as follows, including the following, etc. Because you have to have a complete sentence to the left before the colon is put down. The 2 central questions in the ethical theories are as follows, colon. Not are, colon, but are as follows. It makes it a full sentence, okay? And finally, number 14, however, in using it correctly, we've already gone over this, so we know if we're going to connect the phrases, it's going to be a semicolon, however, comma. And there's an example at the end. I missed the early playing, semicolon, however, comma, I still made the meeting. All right, so that's the review of all the grammar in that grammar guide that I've posted for you. Please, you are all required to watch all of these videos, as boring as they may seem. I really can make you into good writers if you learn some of these rules. I have noticed that all of you can express yourself beautifully. It's just you don't have the mechanics to express yourself perfectly. And that's what I'm aiming for. Thank you.